Chapter 4502. Moreover, the blood-bone barbarian king kept calling the emperor of god emperors, slut. In fact, he even built the Linglong Palace in an attempt to kill his way back to the god world. However, from the memories of the barbaric blood-bone king, Yiqing Luo didn't feel that the barbaric blood-bone king really hated Fenggu. He was only using this method to convince himself to give up on Fenggu. The reason he built the Nimble Palace was because he wanted to fight his way back to the god world, but in reality all he wanted was an explanation from the beginning. Otherwise, he wouldn't have revealed such an expression after learning that the divine emperor had passed away. In the end it even disappeared. Yiqing Luo finally understood now. Why was Dmo Xian so certain that the barbaric blood-bone king would not harm her? Because of her relationship with the divine emperor. No matter what, the barbaric blood-bone king would not do anything to her. It was no wonder, after the blood-bone barbarian king abducted her to the heaven realm, he gave her a supreme status and even handed over everything in the Gu residence to her. However, he did not meet her, because he didn't know what kind of attitude he should use to face her. She was related to the emperor of the divine emperor. From the looks of it now, she began to sympathize with the barbaric blood-bone king. The unrequited love is the most hurtful. However, he couldn't give up so easily. It was unknown whether the blood-bone barbaric king had awoken because it had subconsciously heard Feng Ji's words, "If you don't wake up, I'll leave," or it had already thought things through. In short, the barbaric blood-bone king sat on the spot for a while before he stood up and walked out of the cave with a gloomy expression. In a dense forest, the thick, withered leaves covered all traces of people. The barbaric blood-bone king swept his gaze around. He didn't discover anyone else. He also didn't smell the aura of the person he wanted to see in the air. He closed his eyes slightly. He was obviously disappointed. Sure enough, he was deeply in love with the divine emperor, even until now. The blood-bone barbarian king was still hoping to see Fenggu. He wanted to hear her explanation. Even if it was a made-up explanation. As long as she said it, he would believe it. The barbaric blood-bone king stood in the dense forest for a long time. Standing there, Yiqing Luo felt the earth shaking and the space in front of her started to distort. It was time to switch memory spaces again. This time Yiqing Luo automatically closed her eyes. The feeling of that darkness penetrating his eyes was very uncomfortable. When the feeling of the earth shaking and mountains shaking disappeared, Yiqing Luo then slowly opened her eyes. He adjusted himself to the brightness of the light. He scanned his surroundings. She was now in a huge mansion. It was resplendent and luxurious. She looked very familiar. This was the bone residence that she lived in when she was in the heaven realm. Yiqing Luo was trying to figure out what time this memory was from. In an instant he had gone from the god realm to the heavenly realm. However, at this moment the Gu residence was extremely gloomy. It was such a huge venue. Not even a shadow of a person could be seen. It was empty, silent, and the atmosphere was a little strange. Yiqing Luo followed her memory and found the blood-bone barbaric king's courtyard. He had yet to get close. Her hand was suddenly grabbed by a force. His entire person was suddenly pulled into the darkness. Yiqing Luo was on high alert as she turned her hand to attack the person behind her. However, when he caught a glimpse of a black figure out of the corner of his eye, he stopped. She frowned and looked behind her. What came into view was the palace lord of the secluded palace who was shrouded in a black robe. In the darkness he looked even more sinister. Chapter 4503. Yiqing Luo's eyes sunk. "It's you." The palace lord's hand was still clasping her arm. His eyes under the black robe were slightly dark. "Didn't I say not to follow?" Yiqing Luo raised her brows. "You say no and I won't follow? The current owner of the bone residence seems to be me. You barged into my territory." The palace lord's emotions fluctuated, as though there were some ups and downs. After some time he sighed helplessly. "You shouldn't have come in." "Blood-bone barbaric king's memory is your motive?" Yiqing Luo flung his hand away as her lips curled into a cold arc. "How is it, have you seen what you wanted to see?" The palace lord wanted to say something, but when the words reached the tip of his tongue, he swallowed it back. In the end he only spat out 3 words, "Not yet." Yiqing Luo scoffed lightly as her long and narrow eyes didn't conceal her ridicule. Her gaze swept past the blood-bone barbaric king's courtyard. The ridicule in her eyes deepened. "If I ask you, what is the palace lord of darkness trying to get from the blood-bone barbaric king, will you answer?" The palace lord of darkness raised his head slightly. The black robe covered his face and his current emotions couldn't be seen. His voice was slightly hoarse. "What did you see?" He didn't answer but asked back. Yiqing Luo didn't hide as she was very straightforward, blood-bone barbaric king's memory. She paused as her long and narrow eyes curved. Don't tell me. You didn't see it? If he had seen earlier, those memories between the blood-bone barbaric king and the sovereign of gods. At this moment he definitely wouldn't ask like this. For a long time, there was no response from the other party. This was also indirectly confirmed. The other party was indeed. She didn't see anything. Yiqing Luo suddenly laughed. Looks like Palace Lord's luck isn't too good. You finally got by Mei as a sacrifice, to open the blood-bone barbaric king's sealed memory entrance. But in the end you didn't get anything. What did you see? He asked again as his voice became much heavier. Yiqing Luo shrugged. I naturally saw something that you didn't, of course. I can't tell you. Yiqing Luo. He suddenly spoke in a serious tone. Tell me now, what exactly did you see? You tell me now, perhaps. I can still guarantee your safety for the time being. But, after this, I can't predict how Master will treat you. Yiqing Luo's eyes curved into a smile. You want to know? Why don't you tell me what you Palace's goal is? What does you Palace want? He fell silent once more. Yiqing Luo's brows curved slightly as her lips curled up, revealing a hint of slyness and ridicule. Since you're not willing to answer, then let's forget about this deal. After Yiqing Luo finished her words, she didn't look at the Palace Lord of Seclusion Palace. The man behind him had no intention of asking any further questions. The atmosphere turned silent once again. There was an awkward atmosphere in the air. After a while, the Palace Lord of Ethereal Palace then retracted his thoughts as he frowned slightly and opened his mouth. Yiqing Luo, even if you don't say it now, when Master makes a move on you, should be careful. Suddenly, a cautious voice was heard from not too far away. She saw a 30 to 40-year-old middle-aged man, leading 2 male servants, carefully walking towards blood-bone barbaric king's courtyard. Chapter 4504. The Lord of Secluded Darkness Palace immediately kept quiet. Both of them quietened down as they looked at the person in front of them vigilantly. The middle-aged man and the manservant didn't notice the two people in the dark as they whispered to each other as they walked. Your daily task is to clean up Bone Lord's courtyard and send the 3 meals to his door, do you understand? The 2 servants nodded obediently, but there was still a look of fear on their faces. Don't be afraid. The middle-aged man comforted them. As long as you don't make any noise when you work and disturb Bone Lord, you will be safe and sound. Although they said that, their faces were still very pale. You should feel lucky to work in Bone Lord's courtyard. As long as you pay attention and don't disturb Bone Lord. Your monthly allowance is higher than others and your life will be much easier. The middle-aged man continued, you 2 are smart kids, just pay attention. As he said that, the middle-aged man sent the manservant to Bone Lord's courtyard and left. After the middle-aged man left, the 2 manservants looked at each other in dismay. Then they looked at Bone Lord's direction. The 2 of them walked into the courtyard silently. Yiqing Luo, who was in the dark, raised her brows when she saw this scene. Those 2 manservants didn't look as innocent and harmless as they looked on the surface. They acted so afraid in front of the middle-aged man. But when the middle-aged man left, the 2 of them walked into the courtyard without any hesitation. Interesting. This was a sign that something was going to happen. The Lord of Secluded Darkness Palace glanced at Yiqing Luo's honeyed smile and frowned slightly. What are you smiling at? Yiqing Luo didn't turn back to look at him as her gaze was fixed on the 2 manservants. There's a good show to watch, I'm happy. Good show? The Lord of Secluded Darkness Palace frowned in puzzlement. Just as he finished his words. Soon after, the 2 servants quickly approached the blood-bone barbarian king's room. Their speed was so fast that it wasn't something an ordinary manservant could possess. The Lord of Secluded Darkness Palace was stunned for a moment as his gaze stopped on Yiqing Luo for a moment, as though he was puzzled why Yiqing Luo knew that there was something wrong with those 2 manservants. After looking for a long time, he didn't see anything strange. Yiqing Luo didn't bother about him. Only then did he turn his eyes back to the servant. The 2 servants were clearly well trained. One on the left and the other on the right, they leaped to the door of the barbaric blood-bone king's room. One of them took out a bamboo tube and inserted it into the window. The servant placed his mouth on the bamboo tube and was about to put the medicine in. Suddenly his expression changed. He abruptly left the bamboo tube and leaped backwards. The servant's body fell heavily to the ground. Black blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. When the other servant saw this, he looked at the bamboo pipe that was stuck in the window but did not move at all. Realizing something, he quickly turned around and wanted to escape. But just as he made his move, the tightly shut door suddenly opened. A terrifying profound light shot out from the door. In an instant, the servant who had escaped was brought back. A tall and straight figure walked out of the room. The blood-bone barbarian king looked dejected. His brocade robe was covered with wine stains and his long black hair was messy like a chicken's nest. He didn't know what else was stuck on it. How could he still have the elegance he once had? But, no matter how disheveled and dejected he looked, the moment he walked out, the frightening aura emanating from his body was enough to intimidate people's hearts. When they saw him, the two servants who had fallen on the ground immediately climbed up and looked at the blood-bone barbaric king vigilantly. End of this chapter. Chapter 4505. Who are you? What's your purpose in approaching me? The barbaric blood king's voice was cold. The servants looked at each other. One of them wiped the blood off his lips, got up and slapped the direction of the barbaric blood king. The other quickly surrounded the barbaric blood king from behind. The two servants showed their killing moves when they attacked. The barbaric blood king sneered, his eyes full of contempt. In the face of the servant's attack, he did not even budge an inch. Standing on the spot, he casually waved his sleeves. The powerful dark wave was like a surging wave. With a bang, he stood in front of the two servants, blocking their way. The two servants were thrown to the ground by the powerful force, spitting out mouthfuls of blood. We were just ordered to test Bone Lord's identity. The servants knew that they were no match for the barbaric blood king, so they immediately lowered their stance. The first servant explained, because the name of Bone Lord is the same as the sinner from the divine realm, so someone offered a high price to let us test the relationship between you and the sinner from the divine realm. Sinner? The barbaric blood king's eyes darkened and a sharp glint flashed across his eyes. We know that you are definitely not that sinner, but the other party offered a high price, so we just came to test. The second servant hurriedly said. The barbaric blood king frowned slightly and did not speak for a long time. The expression on his face was very indifferent. The silent look on his face. This caused the two servants to tremble in fear. Their eyes were filled with unconcealable fear and dread. They did not expect. The strength of this person called Bone Monarch was actually so high. Trembling with fear, they waited for the barbaric blood king's verdict. However, the barbaric blood bone king's expression did not change as he turned around and returned to his room. With a bang, he closed the door once again. The two servants outside the door were dumbfounded. What did this mean? Bone Lord did not kill them? And did not intend to punish them? Could it be that he let them go? The two servants stared at each other blankly for a long time. Finally, they carefully walked out of the courtyard. With a limp and a tentative step, he turned his head back with every step. He walked out of the courtyard. No one stopped him. The two servants shuddered in fear and eagerly wanted to escape. Just as they supported each other and were about to leave, a hand suddenly appeared in front of them. Then a black shadow flashed past his eyes. They only had time to see a black robe. Then his feet left the ground. He could hear the sound of the wind whistling in his ears. By the time their feet touched the ground again, they saw a figure shrouded in a black robe and emitting an austere aura standing before them. The two servants were so scared that their legs went soft. They knelt on the ground and begged for mercy. Bone Lord, spare us. Bone Lord, spare us. We won't dare to do it again. We won't dare to. If you listen obediently, no one will kill you. Suddenly, a clear and melodious voice of a woman entered their ears. The two of them were stunned, and their begging and wailing stopped abruptly. He looked in the direction of the voice. Behind the black-robed man, a fairy-like woman in fiery red clothes walked out and looked at them with a smile. That smile was bright and dazzling. But the two only felt an inexplicable chill on their backs. Who are you? The servant asked in horror. Chapter 4506. Yi Qing Luo's lips curled into a smile. You don't need to bother about who we are. As long as you answer my questions obediently, you will be safe and sound. The two attendants exchanged glances, weighing the strength of both sides. Although he really couldn't tell how strong the black-robed man and the young and beautiful woman were, he still couldn't tell. But in terms of their temperament, the two of them decisively chose to be obedient. Ask away. From the mouths of the two servants. Yi Qing Luo roughly understood the current situation. It was probably, from the memories before that, Fenggu heavily injured the blood-bone barbarian king and announced to the public. The divine emperor had personally suppressed the blood-bone barbarian king and annihilated it. From now on, there will no longer be a barbaric blood-bone king. As for the matter of Fenggu saving the blood-bone barbarian king, no one mentioned it at all. Other than Fenggu himself, no one knew that the barbaric Bloodbone King was still alive. This explanation matched up with the version which Yiqing Luo had heard from Dmo Xian previously. However, Yiqing Luo expressed that there must be something that she didn't know. After all, it was the barbaric Bloodbone King's memory. There were some things that the barbaric Bloodbone King didn't know, she couldn't see it either. He could only imagine and guess. Yiqing Luo looked at the two footboys for some time and asked again, "Since Bone Lord has already died in God Realm, why do you still want to probe that Bone Lord's identity?" The two servants hugged each other and explained while trembling. This bone mansion had suddenly appeared in the Heaven Realm. No one knew the identity of the master of the bone mansion. However, looking at the luxurious decorations of the Gu residence, it was clear that he was not an ordinary person. There were also profound practitioners who wanted to occupy the Gu residence's territory. They were heading to the Gu residence to stir up trouble. There was only entry and no exit. At first there were people who didn't believe it. However, as more and more profound practitioners disappeared from the world after entering the bone mansion. As time passed, no one dared to take half a step into the Gu residence. As a result, the bone mansion became a strange and mysterious existence. Everyone in the Heaven Domain's ancient city was very curious about the bone residence. But no one dared to test him. There was once when someone outside the bone residence shouted the words Bone Lord. Everyone knew. The master of this bone mansion was called Bone Monarch. However, no one had ever seen this person called Bone Lord. Bone Lord. This name was exactly the same as the name of the sinner who had been suppressed by the Divine Emperor and reduced to ashes. However, no one would lump the two Bone Lords together. After all, the Emperor of the God Emperor had personally said that the sinner of the God world had already been reduced to ashes. However, the two servants expressed that they also did not know the appearance of the person who made the bid. They also did not know why that person would be so interested in Bone Lord. They took the money and entered the Gu residence to do their work. That person, when did he look for you? Yiqing Luo narrowed her eyes as she asked. The servant replied, 3 days ago. 3 days? Yiqing Luo's eyes flashed past a meaningful smile as she asked again, then have you all heard of the matter regarding the Bone Lord being annihilated by the Sovereign of God? The manservant was stunned. He shook his head and said, that's a matter of the immortal realm. How can we, the people of the Heaven Realm, get any information? Yiqing Luo's brows rose as she seemed to be thinking about something. Manservant B suddenly thought of something as he patted his head. Speaking of this, I did hear a few seniors mentioning about the gossip in the immortal realm. But whether it's true or false, I dare not guarantee. Please remember this book's domain name. Com. Wonderful Book House mobile version website. Com. Chapter 4507. Tell me about it. Yiqing Luo wasn't sure which period of time she had entered into this memory. But based on her current speculation, it should be at least half a year or more since that memory. Half a year. Bloodbone Barbaric King had yet to recover from Feng Ji's serious injury. Look at his dispirited look. Apparently he didn't know that he was saved by Feng Gu. Yiqing Luo really wanted to rush out and tell Bloodbone Barbaric King the truth. Unfortunately, this was only a memory that had been born. It wasn't the real world. Even if it changed the story in the memory, it couldn't change the fact that it had been born. Servant B recalled his senior's words and said, I heard that the Emperor of God fell in love with someone and gave birth to a child. Yiqing Luo nodded. This piece of news was indeed true. Feng Gu was indeed pregnant, and gave birth to a child for that person called Xuanhuan. It seemed that this servant B's news was not fake. I heard that everyone in the God realm was trying to find out the identity of the person who fell in love with the Emperor of God. But it seemed that no one knew who that person was. But later on, it was said that the Emperor of God's child had disappeared and the child's father had also disappeared. Now the God realm is in a mess and the Emperor of God is looking for his child everywhere. Servant B's words made Yiqing Luo's eyes move slightly. The child was missing? And that person called Xuanhuan was also missing? The child's father had run away with the child? After Servant B finished, he looked at Yiqing Luo carefully. I have said what I should say now. Now can we? Yiqing Luo waved her hand. The two of them were in a hurry to escape. The palace lord of secluded darkness palace looked coldly at the two figures who were leaving and turned to Yiqing Luo. You believe what he said? Yiqing Luo raised her brows. Why not? There was no need for the servant to lie. What's more, the God realm and Heaven realm were separated by thousands of miles. They were two different worlds. For the heaven realm to know of any news in the god realm, it would at most be an extremely explosive event. It was true that the divine emperor was pregnant and had a child. The disappearance of this child and the child's father in the god realm might not be fake. However, why would this memory appear in the barbaric Bloodbone King's memory? Could it be the disappearance of Feng Ji's child had something to do with the barbaric Bloodbone King? The person who probed if the Bloodbone Barbarian King was the Bone Lord of the Divine World was also someone from the Divine World? Or perhaps, Feng Ji's men? No, it shouldn't be. At that time, when the two servants approached the Bloodbone Barbarian King's room, their bodies carried a murderous aura. Then he attacked the barbaric Bloodbone King. It was also merciless. If it was Feng Ji's people, it was absolutely impossible to kill the Bloodbone Barbarian King. She had a nagging feeling that there was something in all of this that she had overlooked, or perhaps she had yet to understand. Did you think of something? The palace master of the Netherworld Palace noticed the change in the girl's expression. Luo kept her thoughts as she raised her eyes to look at him. Meeting with that pair of deep black eyes, she couldn't see through his emotions. Her lips curled slightly, revealing an arc that didn't look like a smile. Whatever I thought of has nothing to do with you. / So go. Chapter 4508. Luo. Now that we're in the same place, we're on the same boat. The palace lord of the Netherworld Palace didn't like this feeling of being isolated by Luo. When Luo heard that, she couldn't help but laughed out. Don't? You and I are not the same kind of people and our motives are different. She laughed and took 2 steps back. He widened the distance between him and the palace master of the Netherworld Palace. Then she looked at him with a smile. You want to find the secrets in the Bloodbone Barbaric King's memories for the Palace of Gloomy Darkness. As for me, I'm just here to take a look and see if I can give you some trouble. She paused and spread her hands. So, we're actually standing on opposite sides. The palace master of the secluded palace stared at her with a hurricane in his eyes. Luo tilted her head as the corners of her lips curled upwards, as she continued with a beaming smile. So, what do I know? How could I possibly tell you? Luo. The palace lord's voice had sunk a lot. His hands under the black robe clenched into fists. He seemed to be suppressing some sort of emotion. His gaze towards Luo grew deeper and deeper. Don't shout at me. It's useless. Luo dug her ears. Why don't we have a fight? If you win me, I might tell you what I know. The palace master of the Netherworld Palace was obviously depressed. You know that I won't do anything to you. No, I don't know. Luo hurriedly waved her hands, putting on an expression as though she wanted to cut off all relations with him. Don't portray yourself to be so affectionate in front of me. Luo. The palace lord's tone became heavier, unable to accept Luo's increasingly incisive words. Facing his anger, Luo didn't have much of an emotion. She indifferently curled her lips and waved her hand at him. All right, let's disperse here. Go and complete your mission. You're not coming with me? The palace master of Secluded Darkness Palace pursed her lips. Do you think that by following me you will be able to learn things that you can't? Luo rolled her eyes at him. If I don't want you to know and don't want Secluded Palace to succeed, do you think there's any use for you to follow me? The palace master of the Netherworld Palace's mouth moved. He did not want to be separated from Luo. But what Luo said was right. Between him and Luo, it was an opposing situation. He came here. It was an order from his master. This was his mission. As for Luo, she naturally wouldn't allow him to complete the mission so easily. In the end, he didn't say anything. Luo only gave a sarcastic smile. Then he turned around and disappeared in front of the palace master of Gloomy Palace. Far away from the palace master of Gloomy Palace, Luo felt that the air was much fresher. There was a person who was watching her, and there was a high possibility that he was behind her. No matter how he thought about it, he felt goosebumps and uneasy, although he wouldn't really hurt her. But this kind of injury was not a threat to her life. As for the rest, it was hard to say. Luo returned to the Gu residence. He found the courtyard of the Bloodbone Barbarian King with ease. At this moment, the courtyard was quiet. It was no different from when Luo left earlier. The footboy's blood was still on the ground. It could be seen that the Bloodbone Barbarian King did not open the door after the servant left. Luo concealed her presence. She quietly got closer to the Bloodbone Barbarian King's room. She wasn't sure if the Bloodbone Barbarian King would discover her approaching. Chapter 4509. After all, the strength of the two servants just now was not weak. He hadn't even gotten close. He was discovered by the blood-bone barbarian king. She did not think that her strength was above that of the blood-bone barbarian king. However, even if they were discovered by the barbaric blood-bone king, she wasn't too worried. After all, she still had the teleportation secret technique to save her life. But when Yiqing Luo tried to get closer, there was no movement in the room. Yiqing Luo walked as she tried to go around to the back of the room. Then he tried to open the window at the back. As soon as he opened the window, the smell of alcohol assailed his nostrils. The interior of the house was dark, and it was impossible to see the surroundings clearly. There was a moment of silence. The people in the room didn't seem to notice the commotion outside. Yiqing Luo lifted up her skirt and squeezed into the window. The stench of blood and alcohol in the room was unbearable. Yiqing Luo covered her mouth and nose as she frowned as she walked in. She had entered the blood-bone barbarian king's room no less than 100 times in the Gu residence. As for the furnishings inside, he could practically come and go with his eyes closed. The room in her memory was exactly the same as the one she had seen before. Bang! There was the sound of something falling to the ground. Yiqing Luo was shocked. Soon the room became quiet again. She remained silent for a long time before approaching the direction of the sound. He bypassed the bedroom. Yiqing Luo walked to the front of the main hall. In the darkness, he could vaguely see a human silhouette lying on the ground, motionless. It was the barbaric blood-bone king. Was he drunk? Yiqing Luo squinted her eyes slightly as she hid herself behind the pillar. After an unknown amount of time, the barbaric blood-bone king finally moved. He moved. There was the sound of bottles clinking. It could be seen that there were a lot of wine bottles and wine glasses beside him. He struggled to get up from the ground. The sound of bottles crashing into each other could be heard as they fell to the ground. In the quiet and dark room, it was extremely ear-piercing. He staggered to his feet and groped for a moment on the table. Finally he found a bottle of wine. He began to gulp down the wine again. Before the pot of wine was finished, Yi Zichen's eyes lit up. He suddenly fell limp to the ground again. The wine pot fell to the ground, filling the room with the fragrance of wine. The broken pieces of the wine flask splashed towards Yiqing Luo's feet. This was simply the rhythm of leading a befuddled life. He drank when he woke up, slept when he was drunk, and continued drinking when he woke up, no matter how good one's physique was. If this went on, that's still alcohol poisoning, right? It was estimated that ever since the barbaric blood-bone king came to the heaven realm, it had maintained this state. Looking at the blood-bone barbaric king's current state, he really did look like he had fallen out of love. Yiqing Luo squatted behind the pillar for quite some time. The blood-bone barbaric king was indeed drunk and unconscious. She simply walked out from the darkness. However, the moment she moved, there was no reaction yet. The sound of wine pots clinking against each other could be heard. In the next instant, a black shadow attacked him. The strong smell of alcohol filled his nose. Her wrist was tightly clasped by a cold hand. F***ck. Yiqing Luo let out a curse as she abruptly clasped that icy cold hand, trying to avoid it. But that strength was extremely strong. It was as if he was grabbing her hand and pulling her whole body into his arms. The smell of alcohol almost made Yiqing Luo faint. Was this barbaric blood-bone king pretending to be drunk? Deliberately luring her out? Yiqing Luo cursed in her heart and was about to teleport away. Suddenly she heard a choked voice transmitted into her ears. Fenggu. Fenggu, hurry up and read the latest update. Download address, phone reading. Chapter 4510. Fenggu? He was calling. Fenggu? Yiqing Luo's movements paused slightly. This pause made blood-bone barbaric king's arms hug her tightly. That strength almost kneaded Yiqing Luo into two halves. Yiqing Luo wanted to struggle. But just as she moved, blood-bone barbaric king panicked and increased his strength. He hugged her even tighter. As he hugged her, he spoke in a choked voice. Fenggu, don't be angry with me. Fenggu, I know I'm wrong, don't leave me. Don't. Yiqing Luo. Blood-bone barbaric king had treated her as Fenggu? She stopped struggling. Blood-bone barbaric king then calmed down a little. Fenggu? You came to look for me, you still came to look for me? You can't let go of me, right? Yiqing Luo felt uncomfortable being hugged, but she didn't dare to struggle too much. She could only purse her lips and said word by word, let go of me first, you're using too much strength and it stinks. Her words made blood-bone barbaric king stiffen. Yiqing Luo's heart also jumped. Could it be that her voice was different from Feng Ji's and Bloodbone Barbaric King could tell? She immediately became vigilant. But unexpectedly, Bloodbone Barbaric King quickly let go of her and took a step back. Like a child who had done something wrong, he lowered his head. Feng Gu, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. Don't be angry with me, I won't touch you, I won't touch you. As he said that, he lowered his eyes to look at his messy body. He hurriedly tugged at his clothes as though he wanted to take it off, but Yiqing Luo was around. I'm going to change now. He had just taken 2 steps when he hurriedly swayed his body back. No. If I leave, what if you leave too? That careful look made Yiqing Luo inexplicably uncomfortable. Bloodbone Barbaric King, he really loved Feng Gu. This was the first time she saw Bloodbone Barbaric King put himself in such a lowly position. Even when he was facing Feng Gu, he didn't care. She had never been in this way. Yiqing Luo sighed. Don't go change, go rest. No. I don't need to rest. Bloodbone Barbaric King's emotions tensed up. Are you leaving? You still don't intend to forgive me. You still don't intend to take me back with you, right? Yiqing Luo frowned. What kind of plot development was this? According to the previous memories. No. The Bloodbone Barbarian King had misunderstood that Feng Gu wanted to kill him. After that, he should be filled with resentment. Why was he the one apologizing now? Yiqing Luo really couldn't understand it. She looked at the clearly unconscious barbaric Bloodbone King. It just so happened that he could take this opportunity to sound him out. Yiqing Luo coughed lightly as she recalled Feng Ji's tone and asked, Don't tell me? You don't hate me? The barbaric Bloodbone King was silent. His head was lowered, and it was hard to see his expression in the darkness. After a long while, he slowly said, I don't hate you. I know that you blame me for doing such a heaven-defying thing. The words you said to me that day were all fake. It was all because you were angry at me, Yiqing Luo. This was just an excuse he came up with to make himself feel better, wasn't it? In that memory, Yiqing Luo couldn't tell that Feng Gu intentionally said those angry words because he was angry at him. I won't do it again. Things that you don't like, I won't do it again. Bloodbone Barbaric King hurriedly raised his head as he swore seriously. Chapter 45:11. The next moment. His entire aura was as gentle as a pet. Feng Gu, don't leave me alone in the heaven realm. Don't leave me so far away from you. Yiqing Luo didn't know how to answer. After all, she wasn't the real Feng Gu. He also did not know what kind of mentality and thoughts Feng Gu, who had wanted to seriously injure and kill him, had when he attacked the Bloodbone Barbarian King. He also didn't understand why Feng Gu would exhaust his own strength to save the barbaric Bloodbone King from the gates of hell. The story of these two was too complicated and melodramatic. Yiqing Luo didn't answer. The Bloodbone Barbaric King muttered to himself. His tone was filled with fear and uneasiness. It's fine if you don't want me to return to the God realm. Then you can also find time to visit me. Yiqing Luo. Was he willing to be a kept man outside? Repeat 500 words, refresh in 20 minutes. Ah, the Xuanhuan IP grand ceremony is too tempting, sob, I was wrong. The next moment. His entire aura was as gentle as a pet. Feng Gu, don't leave me alone in the heaven realm. Don't leave me so far away from you. Yiqing Luo didn't know how to answer. After all, she wasn't the real Feng Gu. She wasn't sure what kind of mentality and thoughts Feng Gu had when he tried to injure and kill her, to take action against the Bloodbone Barbaric King. He also didn't understand why Feng Gu would exhaust his own strength to save the barbaric Bloodbone King from the gates of hell. The story of these two was too complicated and melodramatic. Yiqing Luo didn't answer. The Bloodbone Barbaric King muttered to himself. His tone was filled with fear and uneasiness. It's fine if you don't want me to return to the God realm. Then it's fine if you can find time to visit me. Yiqing Luo. Was he willing to be a kept man outside? The next moment. His entire aura was as gentle as a pet. Feng Gu, don't leave me alone in the heaven realm. Don't leave me so far away from you. Yiqing Luo didn't know how to answer. After all, she was not the real Feng Gu. He also did not know what kind of mentality and thoughts Feng Gu, who had wanted to seriously injure and kill him, had when he attacked the Bloodbone Barbarian King. He also did not understand why Feng Gu had exhausted all his strength to save the Bloodbone Barbaric King from the gates of hell. The story of these two people was too complicated, too melodramatic. Yiqing Luo didn't reply. The Bloodbone Barbaric King muttered to himself. His tone was filled with fear and uneasiness. It's fine if you don't want me to return to the God world. Then it's fine if you can find time to visit me. Yiqing Luo. Was he willing to be a kept man outside? The next moment, his entire aura was as gentle as a pet. Her voice was also very soft and slow. Fenggu, don't leave me alone in the heaven realm. Don't leave me so far away from you. Yiqing Luo didn't know how to answer. After all, she was not the real Fenggu. She also did not know what kind of mentality and thoughts Fenggu, who had wanted to seriously injure and kill him, had when he attacked the blood-bone barbaric king. She also did not understand why Fenggu had exhausted all his energy to save the blood-bone barbaric king from the gates of hell. The story of these two people was too complicated, too melodramatic. Yiqing Luo did not answer. Chapter 45:12. Fenggu held his arm tightly with both hands and looked solemnly at the blood-bone barbaric king. Her voice was hoarse and choked with sobs. I know, if it's Agu, he won't refuse any of my requests. Let me be selfish for the last time. You must take good care of my child. I only trust you, only you can trust me. When she said this, her tone was filled with endless sorrow. What on earth happened? The blood-bone barbaric king sobered up a lot after hearing Fengji's solemn request. He shook his muddled head hard. Fenggu, did something happen in the divine realm? This child what? I don't have time to explain to you. Fenggu hurriedly interrupted him, her face full of pleading and expectation. The only person I can trust now is you. I'll give the child to you. No matter who asks you for the child, you can't give it to him. Her eyes fell deeply on the child. It was as if she wanted to engrave the child's appearance in her heart. It was so painful and sorrowful. Agu, please, you must take good care of the child. After saying this, Fenggu forcefully closed her eyes and withdrew her gaze from the child. Without waiting for the blood-bone barbaric king to speak, Fenggu had already rushed out of the courtyard and disappeared. The blood-bone barbaric king held the child in his arms and quickly chased after her. However, Fengji's figure, along with his aura, had completely disappeared. If it wasn't for the fact that the child in his arms had confirmed Fengji's appearance, the blood-bone barbaric king would have thought all of this was just a hallucination. The blood-bone barbaric king stood in the middle of the courtyard for a long time with the child in his arms. He couldn't come back to his senses. It wasn't until the child grabbed his hand and bit it in his mouth that the blood-bone barbaric king's consciousness came back. He stiffened his head and looked down blankly at the child in his arms. Wrapped in soft and warm satin, the little guy was really small. He was wrinkled and not very good-looking. The little chubby hand grabbed one of his hands and stuffed it into its mouth. Saliva stuck to his fingers. He couldn't feel the slightest bit of annoyance or impatience. Maybe it was because the little one had a pair of round, distinct black and white eyes. Because he was extremely similar to Fenggu. The barbaric blood-bone king stiffened. He turned around and returned to his room with the baby in his arms. As soon as he stepped into the room, the baby squeaked and waved his little hands. He even wrinkled his little face. The barbaric blood-bone king realized that the house was in a mess. Perhaps even the smell of the mass grave was not as bad as this house. He left the room and closed the door. Very quickly, the middle-aged man who Yiqing Luo saw earlier, who brought along a manservant to the courtyard, who was also the butler of the Gu residence, brought along the cleaning staff. Then he asked the barbaric blood-bone king to bring the child to another clean house. As for the reason why the blood-bone barbarian king suddenly had another child, the butler was very tactful and did not ask any questions. The blood-bone barbarian king asked Gu-san to look after the child, while he quickly went to wash himself, getting rid of the smell on his body. The group of people was extremely busy. Although she was a little flustered, she wasn't very good with children. But in the end it was not a big mistake. However, that child loved to nestle in the arms of the barbaric blood-bone king. Giving Gu-san to hug for a while, Gu-san's face was grabbed a few times by the child. If it wasn't for the fact that the barbaric blood-bone king valued the child so much, Gu-san would probably fly into a rage. Chapter 45:13. Yiqing Luo was in the dark, silently watching everything that was happening in front of her. The Gu residence's secret guards were walking back and forth. Blood-bone barbaric king was walking back and forth. But no one had discovered her existence at all. If it wasn't for the fact that she was able to converse with the others in her memory, if it wasn't for the fact that blood-bone barbaric king would have mistaken her for Fenggu when he was drunk, she would have suspected it. Blood-bone barbaric king and the others actually couldn't see her. Otherwise, based on blood-bone barbaric king's ability and the Gu residence's secret guard's ability, how was it possible that they hadn't detected her existence for such a long time? Yiqing Luo expressed a dazed look. After a day's worth of torment, blood-bone barbaric king fed and coaxed the child. He who had just become a father for the first time was already mentally exhausted. He placed the child by the side as he leaned against the head, gently caressing the little baby's head as he panted heavily. Until now he still felt that all these were not real. All of a sudden he had a child. Blood-bone barbaric king lowered his eyelids as he gazed deeply at the little baby's sleeping face. His brows seemed to be tainted with a sliver of memories of the past. Your mother is really magnanimous to hand you over to me just like that. He burst out laughing. Wasn't she worried that I would take revenge on her child because of what she had done to me? This sentence ended. He chuckled in a low voice. But this laugh was filled with obvious pain. Of course she wasn't worried. From the start till the end, she knew how much I loved her, so she dared to hand you over to me without any worries. His hand gently caressed the baby's smooth and tender skin. The minute he touched that piece of softness, the strength of his fingers subconsciously lightened. He was afraid that if he wasn't careful, he would cut the little baby's tender skin. You are the same as your mother, heartless. Even in a stranger's house, you can still sleep so soundly. Blood-bone barbaric king's tone had an obvious change. She knew that I had no way to force myself and hurt her heart, right? His gaze towards the little baby became gentler and gentler. Her low murmur was also very soft. He slowly closed his eyes. His hand was still on the baby's shoulder, and his strength was very gentle. Although I don't know what exactly happened in the divine realm, and I don't know what happened to your mother, but since your mother handed you over to me, I will take good care of you. In his mind, the woman said it over and over again. I only trust you and only you can trust me. The only person I can trust now is you. Believe she really did know about his feelings for her. After an unknown period of time, the barbaric blood-bone king's breathing slowly calmed down. Inside the house, the two of them were sleeping soundly. Xianxia stayed for a long time. Only then did he slowly walk out from the darkness. As she quietly approached, her eyes were fixed on the barbaric blood-bone king. He did not disturb the blood-bone barbarian king even when he reached the edge. She held her breath and looked past the blood-bone barbarian king to the little baby. It was a small ball. It was wrapped in a soft silk cloth. Little Zhao's chubby fingers had unknowingly grabbed one of the blood-bone barbarian king's fingers. Not knowing why, when her gaze fell onto the little baby's upper body, Xianxia's mouth was filled with an indescribable emotion. Like, something seemed to be burning in her chest. It wasn't that kind of scorching feeling. Just, some kind of flame was fluctuating, surging bit by bit. Chapter 45:14. This feeling drove her bit by bit towards the bed. She wanted to see what this baby looked like. But, just as her gaze was about to land on the baby's face, her eyes suddenly turned black. The ground beneath her feet shook violently. The earth shook and the surrounding space started to distort. Xianxia. Motherf ***, was this intentional? At such a crucial moment she changed the spatial memory. She purposely didn't want her to see what the baby looked like. Xianxia ridiculed endlessly in her heart. After the earth-shaking feeling, she opened her eyes again. She was no longer in the bone residence. What entered her eyes was a desolate mountain range. The surroundings were so desolate that there wasn't even a single tree. The sky was strangely oppressive and gloomy. Xianxia frowned as she surveyed the surroundings. Based on her previous experience, usually when she reached this place, coupled with the surrounding environment, Xianxia was certain this memory was going to stir up trouble again. The previous part was still half cruel and half sweet. Now it was going to start the sadomasochistic mode. Xianxia, who had experience, indicated she didn't need to specially look for the brute blood-bone king. Anyway, as an outsider who entered the brute blood-bone king's memory, this memory would appear in front of her sooner or later. But there was a little doubt. Previously, when she met the Lord of Secluded Palace, he obviously wasn't clear about what she was talking about. Brute blood-bone king's memory. Which meant, until now, the Lord of Secluded Palace hadn't seen brute blood-bone king's memory. What she and the Lord of Secluded Palace had experienced was different. What was going on? Was it because the brute blood-bone king's subconscious didn't want this memory to be known by the Secluded Palace? Then why? But she could clearly see every piece of memory, just as she was thinking. Suddenly she heard a sound beside her ear. Xianxia's brows twitched slightly. The sadomasochistic love was about to begin. She surveyed the surroundings. In such a desolate place she really couldn't find any place to hide. In the end she could only climb to a higher mountain. From this angle she could only lie on the ground to carefully look at what was happening below. The dense black aura gave off a cold, suffocating feeling. Below, a figure ran up first. That person was dressed in a black robe, and he was holding a baby in his arms. The strong winds blew against his sleeves. Profound waves rippled in the air. Monstrous waves surged. This terrifying, imposing manner made Yiqing Luo couldn't help but hold her breath, as she retracted her own presence even more. He lay on the huge rock, not daring to move. This scene was inexplicably familiar. Not waiting for Yiqing Luo's mind to recall this familiar scene, a woman in a fiery red dress came quickly. Yiqing Luo, there was no need to reminisce. This scene was exactly the same as when Fenggu had heavily injured the barbaric Bloodbone King. Except for the venue. Apart from the Bloodbone Barbarian King, there was a baby in his arms. Fenggu held his long sword, his eyes cold as he stared at the barbaric Bloodbone King. No, more accurately speaking, she was staring at the baby in his arms. Yiqing Luo gauged with her eyes from this distance. The baby was much bigger than when Fenggu had carried him in her previous memory. Based on the time, it should have been more than 3 months. Give me the baby. Chapter 45:15. Bloodbone Barbaric King hugged the child in his arms tightly as a chilly intent flashed past his eyes. He carried the baby and had no intention to let go. What do you treat this place of mine as? His tone was extremely cold. Even his expression was so sunken that it wasn't the same as when he was facing Fenggu. The atmosphere between the two of them was extremely strange. Both of them were entangled with each other as though they wanted to suppress the other party. Yiqing Luo's heart was filled with apprehension. She didn't know what had happened to Bloodbone Barbaric King to actually use such an attitude when facing Fenggu. Even earlier when he displayed his forbidden skill and pretended to be evil to deceive Fenggu. She had never seen such a chilly attitude. Between the two of them. Was there any conflict? And why did Fenggu use such an attitude to ask for the child from Bloodbone Barbaric King? And even using her long sword to point at Bloodbone Barbaric King? At that time she was the one who sent the baby to Bloodbone Barbaric King, wasn't it? Below, the two of them were still confronting each other. Fengji's veiled face was filled with anger. Bloodbone Barbaric King, return the child to me. This is my child. Don't force me to make a move on you. Bloodbone Barbaric King's pupils contracted slightly. His ears were filled with Fengji's voice. Bloodbone Barbaric King. She called him Bloodbone Barbaric King. She didn't call him Agu, it was an exclusive title that belonged to her alone. Was she trying to break off relations with him? Bloodbone Barbaric King's heart was in turmoil. He clenched his fists tightly as his eyes were burning with anger. He lowered his head and looked at the baby who was giggling at him and waving his hands at him. The surging emotions in his eyes were even more intense. As though he was in an intense struggle. He had entered into a frenzied state. Return the child to me. Fenggu saw that he didn't respond for a long time. The chilly intent in her eyes was filled with a thick murderous intent. Her long sword moved and struck towards Bloodbone Barbaric King. Her action was clean and crisp without any hesitation. A dangerous aura shrouded Bloodbone Barbaric King. Bloodbone Barbaric King suddenly regained his senses as he raised his hand and waved out a burst of profound wave, blocking Fengji's attack. He held the baby tightly and leaped to the other side. Are you crazy? The child is still in my hands. What if he gets hurt? Fengji's attack just now. If he had been just a little slower. He wasn't the only one who was severely injured. Even this child would suffer a calamity. Did she hate and loathe him that much? You don't even care about your own child? That's my child. What I do has nothing to do with you. Fengji's words were cold and emotionless. Bloodbone Barbarian King, don't think that I don't know the reason why you won't return my child to me. She gripped her sword tightly, and the edge of the sword shone with a cold light. Isn't it because of that Divine Phoenix profound heart jade in her body? Fenggu spat out word by word. His tone was filled with ridicule. Unfortunately, you've miscalculated something. The so-called Divine Phoenix profound heart jade is something that only the next Divine Emperor has the qualifications to use. Even if you hold the child in your hands, you still won't be able to display the true use of the Divine Phoenix profound heart jade. The Bloodbone Barbaric Monarch's face turned darker and darker as the woman continued to speak. His expression also became extremely ugly. The surrounding atmosphere fell into an icy cold state. At this moment, Yiqing Luo, who was sprawled on the huge rock. Her entire body was icy cold. Her heart was pounding violently. Divine Phoenix profound heart jade. That baby's body contained the Divine Phoenix profound heart jade. Chapter 45:16. Yiqing Luo's hand slowly pressed onto her own heart. This place, there was also a divine phoenix profound heart jade. She held her breath. There was an idea forming in her mind. But she didn't dare to think too much about it. He didn't dare to think about it. But his mind kept repeating the same words over and over again. The baby's body contained the divine phoenix profound heart jade. In her body there was the divine phoenix profound heart jade. In this world would 2 divine phoenix profound heart jades appear? She suppressed the surging emotions in her chest and looked down again. His gaze unconsciously fell on Fenggu, the emperor of divine emperors. Blood-bone barbaric king, quickly give me the child. Feng Ji's stern voice interrupted Yiqing Luo's thoughts. At this moment Feng Ji's eyes were overflowing with hostility. There was no trace of her usual gentleness and elegance. The barbaric blood-bone king tightened his grip on the baby in his arms. His expression was cold. What did you just say? The profound heart jade in this child's body is the divine phoenix profound heart jade. Don't play dumb. If you didn't know the use of this child, why didn't you give him to me? Fenggu sneered. The barbaric blood-bone king's face turned ashen. He gnashed his teeth and glared at Chu Yang. You asked me for this child because of this profound heart jade? Feng Ji's eyes were full of disdain. Don't look at me like that. It's like I'm sorry. This is my child. I can do whatever I want. It has nothing to do with you. She waved her sword. The sharp blade shone with dazzling cold light under the reflection of the mystic light. Bloodbone barbarian king, the current you, is no match for me. The barbaric bloodbone king's pupils suddenly contracted and he looked down at the child in his arms. You, what do you mean by this? Fenggu smiled coldly. Don't think that I don't know the consequences of using the forbidden skill. The pupils of the barbaric bloodbone king contracted even more. Yes, after casting the forbidden technique, he would have to pay an equivalent price. There was no end to using forbidden techniques and cultivating forbidden techniques to make himself stronger. However, ever since he was injured by Fenggu, after the baby was born, since then he had never touched the forbidden art again. The reason he cultivated the forbidden technique was to protect Fenggu. He wanted to dispel the restless factors that had ulterior motives towards the child in Feng Ji's womb. Later on, it was meaningless. Moreover, Feng Ji's child was born. After that, to the outside world, he was a dead man, sealed in the heaven realm, unable to go anywhere. He had no intention of continuing to practice forbidden techniques. Therefore, correspondingly, he needed to bear the pain of the backlash caused by the forbidden technique. The current him. Perhaps in the heaven realm he could be considered an expert. However, in the god world it was simply not enough. Not to mention that his opponent was the emperor of the divine emperors. Furthermore, in the end he could not bear to hurt her. Whether it was in the past or now, he was no match for Fenggu. Give me the child. Seeing that the blood-bone barbarian king did not respond after a long time, Fenggu had already lost his patience. He raised his long sword and thrust it towards the blood-bone barbarian king. The barbaric blood-bone king was still immersed in his own thoughts and did not react at all, until the murderous long sword swept past his eyes. Only then did he suddenly react and raise his head. The sharp long sword was coming towards his face. Subconsciously, the barbaric blood-bone king held the child in his arms tightly and quickly avoided the incoming murderous aura. End of this chapter. Chapter 45:17. Oh. But the long sword still brushed past his arm, causing a huge wound. Fresh blood splattered all over the ground. Bloodbone barbaric king quickly took 2 steps back as he stared at Fenggu with an ugly expression. Give me the child. Fenggu gritted her teeth. Her eyes were filled with malevolence as she swiftly attacked bloodbone barbaric king. That move after move was completely merciless. She really wanted to kill him and snatch the child. Bloodbone barbaric king's heart was throbbing in pain, as though he had returned to the past. The scene when she injured him. Her coldness, her ridicule, all her murderous intent towards him. Wah! Bloodbone barbaric king was so angry that he spat out a mouthful of heart blood. The blood stained his robe. However, he still firmly protected the baby in his arms, not allowing the baby to be stained by the blood in the slightest. The two of them fought each other just like that, back and forth. From the beginning to the end, Bloodbone barbaric king only avoided swiftly. Whereas Feng Ji's attacks were swift and violent, her target was the baby. Yiqing Luo, who was on top of the huge rock, felt strange as she watched the scene below. She couldn't explain the strangeness. Only, She felt that something was amiss. Feng Ji's goal was very clear: to get the baby back. However, her attacks were too fierce and ruthless. As though she was totally not worried that she would hurt her own child. While Bloodbone Barbaric King, his expression was very unsightly. The gaze he used to look at Feng Gu was filled with unfamiliarity. He was trying his best to protect the child in his arms. Every subconscious action of hers was to protect the child tightly. Yiqing Luo was sure. Bloodbone Barbaric King was unwilling to give the baby to Feng Gu, not because of the so-called Divine Phoenix profound jade heart. It was from his heart, protecting the baby. But Feng Gu, her actions were too strange. Ya. At this moment, the attack below stirred up waves, setting off thousands of waves. Yellow sand flew everywhere and the ground cracked. It almost blinded Yiqing Luo's eyes. Vaguely, Yiqing Luo saw Bloodbone Barbaric King's body flying out. The baby in his hands also flew out. The little baby was still completely unaware of the current situation. It waved its little hands in the air and squeaked. When Feng Gu saw the child being thrown out, a greedy smile appeared on his face. She threw herself at the baby. She reached out to catch the child. Suddenly, bang! The ground shook violently. Profound waves surged as if they were sweeping up the yellow sand that filled the sky. Rocks tumbled down. Feng Ji's body was shaken by this sudden movement, causing her to lose her balance. In the blink of an eye, bloody bones that looked like spider webs suddenly emerged from the ground all around him. He quickly caught the baby. Then he brought it to the Bloodbone Barbarian King's head. He didn't know if it was an illusion. Yiqing Luo looked over from this distance. He had a feeling that the Bloodbone Barbarian Monarch's blood bones were different from before. The amount of red liquid on the bloody bones was decreasing. That frighteningly cold aura was also extremely weak. Below, the barbaric Bloodbone King took the baby back into his arms. The Bloodbone Barbarian King quickly formed a shield, blocking in front of Feng Gu. Do you know why I'm unwilling to hand the child over to you? Bloodbone Barbaric King's voice was deep and hoarse. The gaze he gave to Feng Gu became increasingly sinister. Chapter 45:18. The baby that was in her hands flew away again. Feng Ji's face darkened. She stared at the barbaric Blood King with a murderous look. Her eyes were filled with mockery and murderous intent. What? Are you not willing to show your ugly face in front of me? But now, for this child with the Divine Phoenix profound heart jade, you don't care about your image in my heart? What do I have to worry about with the current you? The barbaric Bloodbone King sneered as the corners of his mouth twitched. Yes. In the past he had never dared to show such an ugly and terrifying face in front of Feng Gu. He would never let Feng Gu see a single bone in his body. In front of Feng Gu he would always maintain his human form. But now there was no need. The sanguineous bones were wriggling in all directions. The barbaric Blood King's upper body was human, and he held the baby tightly in his arms. The lower half of his body was covered with bloody bones. His face was still as handsome as ever. Feng Ji's face was solemn, and her poisonous gaze was locked on the barbaric Blood King. She seemed to be very dissatisfied with his attitude. The barbaric Blood King's hand gently stroked the baby's delicate skin. His thin lips curled up slightly. His face was very pale due to the loss of blood. Back then, you were the one who sent the child to me, and now you want to take him away just like that. What do you think I am? The barbaric Blood King stared into her eyes and said word by word, Feng Gu, in your heart, I have always been a tool to be used, right? He did not want to give the baby to Feng Gu because he could not accept Feng Ji's attitude towards him. Back then he did not allow her to explain at all. He gave the child that she had with another man to him, the person who loved her deeply. Now, without any explanation, he came to ask for the child. And his attitude was terrible, and he even tried to snatch it. In Feng Ji's heart, what was he? Hearing the barbaric Blood King's words, Feng Ji's eyes were even more vicious. She sneered. Yes, I am using you as a tool. After all, you are very useful, aren't you? You like me and you do whatever I ask you to do. I just casually lied to you and you're willing to give up your life for me. These were obviously extremely touching words. But it came out of Feng Ji's mouth. It was bone-chilling cold. Feng Gu sneered. He sneered at the Bloodbone Barbarian King's reckless sacrifice. Because I know you like me, so you will fulfill my request unconditionally. Do you feel very sad? Feng Gu sneered. Give me the child. This will be the last time we meet. I will never appear in front of you again. You don't have to worry that you will be used by me again. Feng Ji's words were sharp and sarcastic. The barbaric blood-bone king's expression did not change at all, until she finished her last sentence. The man, whose gaze had been fixed on the baby's face, finally let out a low chuckle. He slowly raised his head. His pale and handsome face was filled with malevolence and madness. He smiled. His smile was strange and treacherous. He looked at Fenggu and his words were bone-chilling. You want a child, don't you? Unfortunately, I will not let you get what you want. As soon as he finished his words, the baby in his hand was thrown into the air. In an instant, it was densely packed with bloody bones. It was engulfed. Barbaric blood-bone king. Fengji's eyes were bloodshot because of the sudden change. She screamed the barbaric blood-bone king's name. Her voice was extremely sharp. Chapter 45:19. Barbaric blood-bone king actually. He had used the forbidden technique he had cultivated, to use the infant as nourishment and devour it. How dare you? How dare you touch my child? Fengji's sharp voice was filled with rage. She waved her long sword and slashed downwards. The majestic, terrifying, profound ray was about to destroy the heaven and earth. The entire barren mountain began to sink into the ground. The huge rock which Yiqing Luo was lying on was not spared. She hurriedly steadied herself on the huge rock. Just as she moved, the rock broke apart and fell downwards. Yiqing Luo took a few steps back to avoid the cracks and tried to find a foothold again. Not right. Something was definitely not right. Fengji's madness earlier was not because she was worried about the child. No, it was not that she was not worried. But her tone and attitude was not that kind of worry. Not the grief and anger of a mother who had lost her child. Instead it was like discovering water in the desert and spending so much effort to reach the destination, only to discover that everything was an illusion. That kind. The anger of losing what she had spent so much effort to obtain. There was no pain or sadness. As for barbaric blood-bone king, it was even stranger. He actually treated the baby as nourishment and absorbed it into his blood-bone. His feelings for the baby. She saw it very clearly. That was absolutely not fake true feelings. How could it be possible to swallow the baby? Furthermore, barbaric blood-bone king swallowed the baby's words. Had it been verified as well? That baby who possessed the divine phoenix profound jade heart was actually not the same person as her? The baby who had been swallowed was already dead. She was alive and well now. And the most important point was, the God Emperor had passed away and her era was at least 10,000 years apart. 10,000 years. Wasn't she an old demon? Looked like the only explanation was, she might really not be that baby. Just as Yiqing Luo was avoiding the huge rock collapse, the two of them below were already locked in a fierce battle. Barbaric blood-bone king had already fallen into a disadvantageous position in the battle, no matter how cold his words were. But when they really started to fight, he unknowingly avoided a direct confrontation with Fenggu. But the more they exchanged blows, the barbaric blood-bone king could clearly see Fengji's twisted face. The horror in his eyes was filled with venom. Fenggu was completely different from the Fenggu in his memories. It was just like, they were not the same person at all. In the blink of an eye, Fengji's sword swept past and pierced straight into the blood-bone barbarian king's chest. When the sword pierced through his heart, he could still see the disdain and anger in Fengji's eyes. Intense pain and dizziness caused by excessive blood loss. He could no longer maintain the form of a blood bone. She fainted and fell to the ground. While he was unconscious, he vaguely heard the woman's cold and ruthless words, I spent so much effort to create this vessel, and it was destroyed just like that. Damn it. Container? What container? The barbaric blood-bone king couldn't think any further and sunk into darkness. Fenggu looked at the unconscious blood-bone barbarian king. The sword in his hand was about to pierce through his heart. Suddenly, as if he had thought of something, his movements paused. There was a cruel sneer in his eyes. She threw the sword on the ground. Destroying my vessel, how can I let you die so easily? There's a place that is absolutely suitable for you. Fenggu directly carried the barbaric blood-bone king on her shoulder. The breeze blew the red veil on Fengji's face, revealing the red veil, that face which had been covered. Chapter 45:20. Her red lips were like fire, absolutely gorgeous. Exquisite facial features, bright and elegant. Coupled with that pair of soul-stirring eyes, the entire person was breathtakingly beautiful. Bright and flamboyant, almost able to overshadow everything in the world. Yi Qingluo's pupils constricted fiercely. Her body stiffened as well. Because that face that came into view was almost the same as her. Yes. The degree of similarity was at least 80% and above. Except that Yi Qingluo looked more immature and beautiful, whereas Fenggu had the maturity and beauty of a woman. What was going on? Yi Qingluo subconsciously touched her own face. Countless thoughts were surging in her mind. A face that was almost the same. Fengji's daughter had a divine phoenix profound jade heart. She had it too. Could it be? Was she really that little baby? But wasn't that baby swallowed by the barbaric blood-bone king? And 10,000 years had passed. How could she possibly grow up in Nirvana Realm's Three Springs sect? This wasn't right. The time didn't match. Yi Qingluo's thoughts were in a mess. These thoughts made her heart beat extremely fast. Actually, she had guessed this from the beginning. However, he had never associated himself with the God Emperor's true body. No. This was too confusing. She really couldn't make sense of this relationship. Yi Qingluo rubbed her face, her gaze suddenly fell on her wrist, that circle of cherry blossom petals. Her hand pressed on the azure dew bracelet. Right. Look for Old Man Song. Old Man Song had seen the Sovereign of God before. He was clearer than anyone else about what happened 10,000 years ago. But no matter how Yi Qingluo called for Old Man Song, her and Old Man Song's spirit could not connect at all. But her azure dew bracelet was not affected. On this side, Yi Qingluo was still in shock. On the other side, Fenggu had dragged the barbaric blood-bone king away. Yi Qingluo clenched her fists, thinking of that face under Fengji's veil. She leaped up and quickly chased up to Fenggu. Fengji's eyes were cold, her eyes were filled with killing intent, dragging the barbaric blood-bone king at an extremely fast speed. Yi Qingluo was worried that she would be discovered by Fenggu and wanted to follow behind. For a moment he could not keep up with the two people in front of him. After Fengji's figure completely disappeared from the range of his senses, Yi Qingluo blacked out. Immediately after, his body trembled. When there was light in front of him again, she was already deep in the mountains and deep in the forest. In front of him was a huge black hole that surged with thick black fog. It looked extremely horrifying and terrifying. In front of him were Fenggu and the barbaric blood-bone king. Yi Qingluo was slightly stunned. That feeling just now didn't feel like the feeling of jumping to the next memory. Moreover, the two people in front of him were also in the scene just now. What was going on? Do you see what that is? Fenggu threw the blood-bone barbarian king to the ground. The blood-bone barbarian king had already woken up from the jolting. He opened his somewhat turbid eyes and looked at the black holes that filled the sky. His expression changed slightly. Fenggu smiled coldly, his eyes filled with ruthlessness. Do you think that it's so easy to swallow the container that I've tried so hard to get? Letting you die is letting you off too easily. Her long sword moved and directly stabbed into the barbaric blood-bone king's shoulder, hanging him up. The barbaric blood-bone king groaned in pain. Blood seeped out from his shoulder, soaking his robe. But he was stubborn and refused to make a sound. A pair of eyes filled with hatred stared fiercely at Fenggu. End of this chapter. Chapter 45-21. Hate me? Fenggu sneered, don't you love me to death? When she said this, her eyes were filled with disdain. As though she disdained his feelings. Or as though she was extremely disdainful of his love for her. Blood-bone barbaric king was in so much pain that his vision blurred. He gritted his teeth and groaned word by word, now I know. How silly I was in the past, to actually like a slut like you for so many years. So much that he didn't even care about his life, causing himself to end up in such a state. Then you're not too stupid, at least now you know my true colors. Fenggu seemed to be very happy, her eyes were filled with coldness. You'd better kill me. Otherwise, I will definitely kill you. Blood-bone barbaric king gritted his teeth and roared. But he had lost too much blood and the pain in his body. It made him almost speechless. Fenggu looked at him coldly, the corners of her lips curled into a cold arc. Kill you? Of course I can't kill you. She pointed to the front at the sky full of black holes. This is something I specially made in the Nirvana realm, it's still in the experimental stage, help me? Guard this place well. Fenggu casually threw him into that black hole. Blood-bone barbaric king groaned, and was thrown into the black hole. Instantly, countless black chi gushed out from that black hole. Like thousands of hands, grabbing hold of blood-bone barbaric king and swallowing him. Blood-bone barbaric king's shrill scream was heard from the black hole. Those blood-curdling screams. It made one's heart tremble. Yiqing Luo's heart also trembled. Blood-bone barbaric king was an especially tolerant person. Even the long sword pierced through his chest. He didn't even make a sound when the long sword pierced into his shoulder and lifted him up. But when he was thrown into the black hole, he let out a blood-curdling scream that showed the pain in the black hole. It was an unbearable pain for him. Yiqing Luo stared at Feng Ge without blinking. Her heart was still trembling. Feng Ji's eyes had no trace of emotion. It was as though she didn't care about anything about blood-bone barbaric king. What was she trying to do? Who's that? Suddenly Feng Ji's eyes turned cold as she reprimanded. He raised his sword and flipped it in his palm. Yiqing Luo instantly felt a chill down her spine. It was like being stared at by a venomous snake. It was bone-chilling. Her heart skipped a beat as she met Feng Ji's murderous gaze. She quickly backed away. However, how could her speed compare to the divine emperor's? In the blink of an eye, Feng Ji's long sword had already pierced her eyeball. Just then, when it was still a little distance away from the eyeball, Yiqing Luo only felt her vision turning black. The surrounding space began to distort rapidly. As the ground shook, she felt as if she had fallen into an abyss. His whole body kept falling down. What was going on? Just now, it felt like he was jumping to the next part of his memory. Why was she falling from the sky in the next memory? Yiqing Luo wanted to flop around. However, he could not move his limbs at all, until the restraints on his body were broken. Only then did her vision regain its brightness. However, right now she was floating in midair. Their surroundings were pitch black and they couldn't see their surroundings clearly. She tried to move. She discovered that she could actually walk in midair. It was like her soul was the same. What kind of situation was this? Bone Lord? Suddenly, a soft voice was heard from below. Yiqing Luo was stunned as she swiftly floated towards the voice. Chapter 45-22. In front of her, it was a piece of black sea. Two figures were moving bit by bit as they walked in the black sea. Walking. See? No. Not right. This was not the sea. Yiqing Luo's figure slowly leaned downwards. He could clearly see the figures of those people. They were that lady called Gu San and Gu Yi, blood-bone barbaric king's secret guards. These two of them were of course not those few secret guards that Yiqing Luo had interacted with in the outside world. The Gu residence's secret guards were ranked according to their numbers. This batch of secret guards should be the earliest batch of secret guards that followed the blood-bone barbaric king. Bone Lord, where are you? Gu San called out softly. Looking at his expression, he seemed to be struggling. Yiqing Luo carefully avoided the two of them and landed at a position slightly behind the both of them. She could see clearly. The surroundings were not a piece of black sea. It was obviously a ball of thick black fog, a piece of pitch-black darkness. There was no place to hide. She could only maintain a distance as she followed behind those two secret guards. The two secret guards' attention had been focused on searching for the blood-bone barbaric king and did not notice anything strange. Just at this moment, suddenly there were a few cracking sounds in front of him. She saw the entire sky filled with thick black fog. One by one, the blood-colored bones stepped out. Kacha-kacha. Even her ears were filled with the sound of the bones colliding. Yiqing Luo then saw it clearly. Under the thick black, there was a large patch of densely packed blood bones. And her surroundings were also covered with large patches of blood bones. But what shocked her was her body penetrated through every single blood bone. The densely packed, connected blood bones all passed through her body, as though they could not sense her existence at all. Yiqing Luo stretched out her hand to touch the blood bones. Her hand went through the blood bones. Yiqing Luo's heart thumped. Her gaze swiftly turned towards the Gu residence's secret guards. Was it these blood bones an illusion? Or was it her problem? Following the densely packed blood bones appearing, Gu Yi and Gu San's searching footsteps stopped. Gu San raised his head, looking at the blood bones that were almost as tall as a two-story building, his eyes filled with worry. Bone Lord, why are you looking for us? The two Bone Mansion secret guards stood away from the bloody bones. They also seemed to be very afraid of touching the blood bones. Kacha, kacha. Along with the sound of bones cracking, a head slowly slid down the joints and appeared in front of the two of them. It was the head of the barbaric blood-bone king. His face was pale and his eyes were filled with malice. He was like a trapped beast, so gloomy that it made people's hearts tremble. Take this out. The blood-bone barbarian king's hoarse voice sounded. A small baby wrapped in a soft substance was thrown into the arms of Bone San. Gu San hurriedly received it. Then she looked at the baby in her arms. His cheeks were pink and he looked like he was sleeping peacefully. Her eyes reddened. Bone Lord, you spent so much effort to get in touch with us just to let us bring the child out? Gu San's voice was choked with emotion. Get out. The barbaric blood-bone king shouted sternly. Gu San hugged the baby tightly. His eyes were red as he looked at the barbaric blood-bone king's current appearance. This child is the child of the Emperor of God. You became like this because of the Emperor of God. Bone Lord, why do you have to hurt yourself like this for her child? You don't want to listen to this God's words? The barbaric blood-bone king's voice became hoarser and sharper. After this loud shout, he couldn't stop coughing violently. Chapter 45-23. Bone Monarch. Bone 1 hurriedly said, Bone 3 is just concerned about you. Back then Bone Lord did not devour this baby. Instead he hid it in his own blood and bones. Feng Gu was deceived. When he was thrown into the black hole by Feng Gu, not only did Bone Lord have to fight against the evil aura in the black hole, but he also had to fight against it. He also had to protect the baby as much as possible. Until now, only then did Bone Lord have enough power to establish contact with the dark guards of the Bone Residence. It was not easy for them to rush to the Nirvana realm and the black hole that was suppressing the Bone Lord. Bone Lord's request was not for them to think of a way to break the seal on the black hole and rescue him. Instead he asked them to leave with the baby. See the baby. They would think of the culprit who caused their Bone Lord to be reduced to such a state. How could they be willing to take their children out? You have no right to tell me what to do. The barbaric blood-bone monarch's voice became sharper. The blood and bones around them tightly wrapped around the two of them. Take the child out and take good care of him. Don't hand it over to anyone. The two realized the blood-bone barbarian monarch's intention and immediately said, Bone Monarch, tell us, is there any way to save you? We can't take care of this child. Bang. Before the two of them could finish their conversation, he was lifted up by the blood-bone barbarian king and thrown out of the thick black fog. After a while, silence returned to the surroundings. The barbaric blood-bone king also did not move for a long time. Yiqing Luo saw the pain in his eyes. Yiqing Luo pursed her lips slightly. He slowly walked towards the blood-bone barbarian king. He was not worried that the barbaric blood-bone king would discover him. For this place, she was just a soul. The Bone Mansion's secret guards could touch the blood-bone barbarian king's blood bones. And she couldn't. She could float around in this place. This meant that she no longer had a physical body. As expected, she approached the blood-bone barbarian king. The barbaric blood-bone king did not move either. The skull embedded in the bloody bone looked like a statue. Until Yiqing Luo approached. Only then did he vaguely hear a few sounds. Qing Luo? Qing Luo? Qing Luo? Yiqing Luo's heart immediately tightened. His eyes widened. What the barbaric blood-bone king shouted was her name. Just as she was about to lean in closer to hear more clearly, a voice suddenly rang out. Suddenly, her hand felt like it was being sucked by a huge suction force. She didn't have time to react. His body was suddenly sucked up by the suction force. Then his body fell heavily to the ground. The feeling of weightlessness made Yiqing Luo cry out in shock. Suddenly he opened his eyes. What greeted his eyes was a patch of dazzling sunlight. It stung her eyes and hurt a little. She raised her hand to cover her eyes. A large palm covered her eyes. His slender fingers massaged her eyes with just the right amount of strength. The familiar scent of sandalwood seeped into his nose. Yiqing Luo's hands grabbed that huge palm as she turned around abruptly. She saw the face that she longed for even in her dreams. Her face was reflected in his obsidian-like eyes. Yiqing Luo's eyes widened. Xian. The person in front of her was Dmo Xian. She raised her hand and pinched Dmo Xian's cheek, giving him a hard pinch. Are you real? Surely I'm not still in the memory space, right? Chapter 45-24. Dmo Xian laughed softly. His long slender hand held her little hand and clasped it in his palm. You're back. He held on to her hand and slowly placed it on his face. Finally back. He murmured softly as he slowly closed his eyes. Feeling her scent, her warmth. Men rarely showed such a harmless expression on her face. Yiqing Luo's heart was in a mess. From the man's big palm helping her to rub her eyes. From his aura enveloping her body and mind, she was certain. This Xian. He was her Xian. She had returned to the real world. This was no longer the barbaric blood-bone king's memory. Yiqing Luo's eyes gazed deeply at the man's elegant face. His picturesque eyebrows revealed an obvious tired look. His thick eyelashes spread out, casting an arc, but it was unable to hide the purple under his eyes. How long had she stayed in the barbaric blood-bone king's memory? This man, how long had he been looking for her? Yiqing Luo's hand slowly covered his eyes. Xian, I'm sorry I made you worried. I know nothing will happen. Xian closed her hand and placed it by his lips as he gently kissed it. I just miss. Knowing that nothing would happen to her was one thing. Worrying was another. I miss too. Yiqing Luo's lips curled into a sweet smile as she generously sent her lips over and kissed him. Xian's arms wrapped around her petite body, until the young lady gave a low laugh and that soft little tongue drilled into his mouth. His body shook. He suddenly pressed the back of the young lady's head and deepened the kiss. Their breaths intertwined. Like a life and death entanglement. They used their own way to declare their longing for each other. After some time, Xian then released the young lady and hugged her tightly in his arms. Yiqing Luo could clearly hear the man's strong and powerful heartbeat. Once. From her eardrums, it penetrated her heart. Yiqing Luo's brows curved as her little hand followed his waist and slowly slid down. I thought that you wouldn't be able to restrain yourself and continue to do some overboard things. Xian clasped her hand, his eyes filled with warning. Don't stir up the fire if you continue. I don't care if I'm tired or not. Yiqing Luo hurriedly retracted her hand and pushed her little head against his chest. I'm tired, I'm so tired that I can't move, I can't take advantage of others' difficulties. Her hands were no longer messy. His little head began to rub against the fire. Xian looked at the furry little head in his arms as a helpless yet pampering smile flashed past his eyes. He held the girl's delicate body tightly and stopped her from teasing him any further. If you tease me again, I'll take it that you want it. Yiqing Luo giggled as she stuck her head out from his arms and circled her arms around his neck. All right, I won't tease you anymore. Isn't it so hard to see you? I'm happy. Xian bit her nose and his low and hoarse voice revealed a bewitching magnetism. Now let's play tonight? Let's try. Yiqing Luo's cheeks blushed slightly. The two of them joked around for a while. The warm and sweet atmosphere made Yiqing Luo's exhausted heart finally find peace. She leaned into Xian's arms as she played with his slender fingers and asked casually, That's right, the one who entered the ancestral hall with me was that Palace Lord Ming from Secluded Palace. Have you seen him? Download address, phone reading. Chapter 45-25. Xian lowered his head and bit her earlobe. The strength between his lips and teeth was a little strong. Yiqing Luo felt itchy and painful. Her body was still trembling slightly. Just asking a question and you need to be jealous? Please let me go. Please let me go. Listening to the young girl's soft pleading. The man then let go of her earlobe. But his thin lips were still attached to her ear. Between the rubbing of the lips, there was a scorching heat. He came out from the ancestral hall 2 days ago. Xian's voice sounded a little low, as if he was in a bad mood. He was also the one who told me that he had entered the blood-bone barbaric king's memory. Yiqing Luo blinked her eyes and clicked her tongue. Looks like Baisu really hates me. Baisu? Xian frowned slightly. What has it got to do with Baisu? Yiqing Luo pounced on him and pressed him under her body. What exactly is the relationship between you and Baisu? Xian supported her and let her lie firmly in his arms. He looked down at her and asked, What did Baisu do? Answer my question first. Yiqing Luo climbed up his chest and both her hands pinched his face. After you answer my question, I will then know what kind of tone I should use to complain. Xian's pupils contracted slightly. He held Yiqing Luo's slender waist. In his heart he had roughly guessed something. But he still followed Yiqing Luo's words. To me she is both a teacher and a friend. Since I have memories she has been by my side like an elder sister, teaching me a lot, how to survive in this world. Since you have memories? Yiqing Luo caught the main point. Amnesia? Not considered as amnesia. Xian shook his head, just can't remember the things in the past. But those to me are not important. How can it not be important? Yiqing Luo sat up straight, her little but sat on his stomach, both hands clutching his lapel. I said, I don't seem to have heard anything about family. You've actually forgotten about it? Don't you want to know who is your father? Don't want to find them and ask why they separated? The girl lowered her head and met his eyes. Her soft silky black hair cascaded down and landed on Dimo Xian's body and face. His hand gently rested on the young girl's slender waist as he gently curled his lips into a smile. With Lil Luo heir by my side, it is enough. He did not have much need for his past memories. He thought about what had happened in the past. To him it was not difficult at all. It was just that he didn't want to and couldn't be bothered to think about it. In his memory, having Lil Luo heir was his greatest happiness. The man's words instantly softened Yiqing Luo's heart. She pursed her lips and patted his chest weakly. You only know how to seduce me with words of love and move me. I can't beat you. Dimo Xian pinched her waist. Now can you tell me what happened between you and Baisu? Yiqing Luo pouted her lips and snorted. Even if Baisu is a teacher and a friend, I still want to complain. She rambled on and on about how Bai Mei had been deceived by the Palace of Gloomy Shadows and used as a sacrifice to unlock the barbaric Bloodbone King's memories. She also complained about Baisu's attitude towards her in an aggrieved manner. After that she hammered his chest. You had to wait for the Palace Lord of Gloomy Shadows to tell you, only then did you know that I was in the Ancestral Hall. Baisu saw me entering the barbaric Bloodbone King's memories with her own eyes, so she obviously did not tell you on purpose. Download address, phone reading. Chapter 45-26. Dimo Xian held her hand as his eyes turned extremely gloomy. I met her at the Ancestral Hall. Yiqing Luo pretended to put on a fierce expression as she snorted lightly. See, she did it on purpose. Yes, she told me that she only saw that person from secluded palace in the Ancestral Hall, and had never seen you. Dimo Xian's expression turned darker and darker. He put his arm around the girl's waist. He slowly sat up straight. Yiqing Luo wrapped her arms around his neck. Do you believe me or her? I believe you. Dimo Xian replied without any hesitation as he placed a hand on her waist and said word by word, Lil Luo, to me, you are more important than anything else. He slightly lowered his eyes, and a trace of coldness flashed across his eyes. Baisu? He hadn't thought about it. One day, he and Baisu would end up like this. Baisu was doing this for Bai Mei. He hated his little Luo, even when he knew that Lil Luo was in danger. She even hid everything from him. Yes, Baisu is too much. Yiqing Luo pinched his face, putting on a fiendish look. So, this can totally offset the fact that she thinks that I hate Bai Mei for not saving her. Dimo Xian was slightly stunned. Lil Luo, His hand from her waist held both of her hands. Yiqing Luo gave a snort as she maintained her fierce look. This time it has already been cancelled out. If there's a next time and she still wants to use Bai Mei's death to bicker in front of me, I want you to make a choice out of two, do you hear me? Dimo Xian's eyes turned cold when he mentioned Baisu. At this moment, it had transformed into a layer of warmth. His obsidian-like peach blossom eyes were exceptionally gentle. He raised his hand and stroked the young girl's hair, gently tucking it to her ear. Lil Luo heir. His Lil Luo, really, made him unable to extricate himself from loving her. The so-called complaint. The so-called fierceness. They were just doing it on purpose to give Baisu a way out. Yiqing Luo had never really wanted Dimo Xian to stand up for her and do something to Baisu. She just used this way. She wanted to resolve the grudge between her and Baisu. If Baisu was still clear-headed, she would know what to choose. Yiqing Luo threw herself into his arms. Alright, this matter, let's end it like this, but I've made it clear there's no next time. Dimo Xian held her waist tightly. Outside the window, a ghost-like shadow floated lightly. Like a kite with a broken string, it swayed unsteadily, unable to find its way. The illusory shadow seemed like it was about to be blown away by the wind. All of a sudden, a slender figure appeared behind the shadow. That person sneered. His eyes under the black robe revealed a hint of coldness. Do you regret it? Do you regret getting yourself into such a situation? The shadow did not turn around. He just stood there quietly. He looked in the direction of the Ancestral Hall as his thoughts drifted. That person continued to sneer. She is such a person. To outsiders she is cold and ruthless, decisive in killing. But once it involves the people she cares about, she is kinder than anyone else. You hurt her like this, but she still forgave you and even found an excuse to stop the Overlord from taking action against you. You can say that she has put in a lot of effort. Shut up. That illusory shadow's delicate body swayed. She raised her head slightly, her face was cold. You palace of darkness. Don't think that I don't know that the direct cause of my sister's death is all because of you. End of this chapter. Chapter 45-27. That person looked at the shadow indifferently, his face filled with hatred. He scoffed lightly, you should be the clearest about why Bai Mei died. Yiqing Luo not saving her is within reason, so you have no right to blame her. Bai Su stared unblinkingly at the palace lord of secluded darkness palace who was clad in a black robe and surrounded by black qi as she suddenly sneered, Are you speaking up for Yiqing Luo? Do I need to speak up for her? The man sneered. You heard what she said to Di Zun just now. You know what kind of person she is. Bai Su pursed her lips tightly. Her smoke-like shadow was so dim that it almost melted into the air. After a long while, she then looked coldly at the palace master of Gloomy Palace and gritted her teeth. Don't let me run into you. Otherwise, I won't let a single one of you off. As soon as he finished speaking, her body had already turned into a puff of white smoke, completely disappearing in front of the palace master of secluded darkness palace. Yiqing Luo and Dmo Xian cuddled for a while. With great difficulty she managed to suppress Dmo Xian's thoughts of parting ways with Baisu. The two of them walked out of the room. Xiaochun looked at the familiar scene in the bone residence. It was somewhat similar to the scene in the savage blood bone monarch's memory, yet it was also different. She was still in a daze. Until Dmo Xian wrapped his arms around her waist and asked her gently. Only then did she regain her senses. What are you thinking about? Dmo Xian asked as he pulled her towards the main hall. Yiqing Luo's eyelashes fluttered. I'm thinking about the blood bone barbaric king. I'm sleepy. Typing is a little slow. I have to repeat 500 words. I'll edit it in 10 minutes, moi. That person looked at the shadow indifferently, his face filled with hatred. He scoffed lightly, you should be the clearest about why Bai Mei died. Yiqing Luo not saving her is within reason, so you have no right to blame her. Bai Su stared unblinkingly at the palace lord of secluded darkness palace who was clad in a black robe and surrounded by black qi as she suddenly sneered, Are you speaking up for Yiqing Luo? Do I need to speak up for her? The man sneered. You heard what she said to Di Zun just now. You know what kind of person she is. Bai Su pursed her lips tightly. Her smoke-like shadow was so dim that it almost melted into the air. After a long while, she then looked coldly at the palace master of Gloomy Palace and gritted her teeth. Don't let me run into you. Otherwise, I won't let a single one of you off. As soon as he finished speaking, her body had already turned into a puff of white smoke, completely disappearing in front of the palace master of secluded darkness palace. Yiqing Luo and Dmo Xian cuddled for a while. With great difficulty she managed to suppress Dmo Xian's thoughts of parting ways with Baisu. The two of them walked out of the room. Xiaochun looked at the familiar scene in the bone residence. It was somewhat similar to the scene in the savage blood bone monarch's memory, yet it was also different. She was still in a daze. Until Dmo Xian wrapped his arms around her waist and asked her gently. Only then did she regain her senses. What are you thinking about? Dmo Xian pulled her towards the main hall as he asked. Yiqing Luo's eyelashes fluttered. Thinking about the savage blood bone monarch. Until Dmo Xian wrapped his arms around her waist and asked her gently. She then regained her senses. What are you thinking about? Dmo Xian pulled her towards the main hall as he asked. Yiqing Luo's eyelashes fluttered. Thinking about the savage blood bone monarch. Chapter 45-28. A trace of helplessness and pampering flashed past Dmo Xian's eyes as he tapped her forehead. I've actually been coaxed out by you. Yiqing Luo pinched his face. No choice, who asked me to be so smart? She smiled and leaned her head against his chest. A faint smile appeared in his eyes. Xian, it was really cute. She knew. In actual fact, Dmo Xian was not because she had coaxed the information out of him. It was just that he did not intend to hide it from her. He understood her. He knew that she already knew most of the things that had happened. Even if he didn't admit it. Basically, she could confirm her guess. He pretended to be tricked into answering. He was only cooperating with her on purpose, helping her confirm the guess in her heart. She lazily leaned into Dmo Xian's embrace, her legs climbing towards the man's tall and straight body. I don't want to go anymore, hug me. Dmo Xian hooked his arm around the young lady's body as she wriggled around him, holding her firmly in his arms. Yi Qingluo squinted her eyes comfortably, like a contented kitten. Dmo Xian carried her and strode towards the direction of the hall. Ah Xian, how much do you know? Yi Qingluo's eyes were still closed and her voice was very soft. Dmo Xian lowered his head and looked at the young lady's exquisite face as his pupils deepened. More than you, what do you want to know? What I can be sure of now is that I am the child that the divine emperor gave birth to back then. That baby back then was me. She paused, opened her eyes and looked at the man. The time when the divine emperor passed away was 10,000 years ago. When I entered the barbaric Bloodbone King's memories, it was also 10,000 years ago. At that time there was no Three Springs sect and there were no so-called four major sections. Then, why would I appear in the Three Springs sect 10,000 years later? It didn't make sense at all. After she inherited this body, it had also fused with all the memories. She knew it clearly. He had grown up in the Three Springs sect. She couldn't understand the problem of time. In particular, the events of the past were obviously very complicated. It was only through the memories of the barbaric Bloodbone King. She still couldn't figure out the real reason behind it. I don't know the answer to your question. Dmo Xian sighed softly. Initially, after confirming your relationship with the Divine Emperor, I had also guessed this reason. I think that since you haven't seen the real reason in the barbaric Bloodbone King's memory space, it means that the barbaric Bloodbone King himself doesn't know. Yi Qingluo nodded her head. The Bloodbone Barbarian King was sealed in the black hole of the Nirvana realm by Fenggu. It was also the place where the Bloodbone Barbarian King later built the Linglong Palace. The child was also handed over to the hidden guard of the Bone Residence. What happened after that? You really didn't know. After knowing your biological mother's identity, you still want to look for her? Dmo Xian's deep eyes faintly rippled with a faint light. Yi Qingluo's hand caressed his cheek. Don't you want me to investigate my own background? Dmo Xian paused for a moment and shook his head. It's not that I don't want to, I'm worried. The Divine Emperor's Emperor. The God Realm's Emperor, such a high and mighty position indeed makes one worry. Yi Qingluo's lips curled into a faint smile, but her words were filled with laziness. She slightly straightened her body in Dmo Xian's arms and used both her hands to hold his face. But you are also very clear that even if I don't want to investigate, there will always be someone who will find me. Dmo Xian's eyes faintly surfaced a layer of extremely faint danger. Hurry up and read the latest updates. Chapter 45-29. Yi Qingluo's slender jade-like hand gently covered his eyes. Even if you're around, those people who are eyeing me covetously, are still eyeing me covetously. Dmo Xian grasped her wrist. His eyes, which were as deep as obsidian, stared unblinkingly at her face. He said firmly, I won't let those people hurt you. Yi Qingluo's brows curved slightly. I know. She looped her arms around Dmo Xian's neck once again and buried her entire body into the crook of his neck. Ah Xian, regarding my parentage, I will definitely investigate. I must investigate clearly what happened in the past. Saying that, she raised her head again, her eyes sparkling, revealing a confident look. I promise you in this process I will do my best not to let myself get hurt, and not to do anything that will make you worry. Perhaps it was the young lady's gaze was too sincere. Or perhaps it was the young lady's words, was too firm. Dmo Xian looked at the young lady in front of him, his stern expression finally, slowly softened. He sighed, the gaze which looked at Yi Qingluo, became increasingly tender and affectionate. Following that, he stretched out his arm to encircle the young lady's petite body, pressing her heavily into his arms. Come on, what you said, these words of yours have no credibility at all. Dmo Xian turned his head, his dark red thin lips, reflected a kiss on the young lady's delicate skin. You're always accompanied by danger and uncertain factors. To say that you don't cause trouble, it's impossible. The warm breath, the man's gentle magnetic, mellow voice, mellow like fine wine. It made Yi Qingluo's heart melted by half. I know you've been unwilling to say because my ability is not enough to know all these. Even if I know, it's something that I can't do anything about. The smile on the corners of her lips deepened. Narrow long eyes deeply gazed at Dmo Xian's face. But now, Ah Xian, I am very clear what I'm doing. I know myself because of this decision. What kind of situation will I face? I want to take a gamble, I want to bet on myself, I can. The young lady sentence after sentence, sonorous and forceful words. One had no choice but to believe in her determination. Dmo Xian's hands suddenly exerted force. The girl's delicate body was lifted up by his hands. He opened his mouth and bit down on the girl's pink lips. I will never refute your decision. As their lips and teeth intertwined, the man's low and hoarse voice came, no matter what you want to do, I will accompany you. The man's rich sandalwood scent invaded her body and mind. The girl's eyes curved into crescents as she smiled, until the man let go of her. Only then did she say with a smile, I know. It's because I have a strong backing like you that I can move forward fearlessly. You are my greatest motivation. Diamo Xian tightened his grip. His forehead pressed against hers. The tips of their noses were touching. Their breaths were tangled together. As he listened to the girl's gentle words, the lines on his face became increasingly gentle. It's my honor to be able to support you. When the two of them arrived at the hall, it was already half an hour later. In the hall there was a large circle of people. One by one they wandered around the hall, poking at each other. Apparently they had waited for a long time. They heard footsteps. Everyone looked over at the same time. They saw the two of them who looked like conjoined twins. Yin Xiaoyi raised her hand and covered her eyes. Let us off, the moment we're conjoined you're already showing off your affection. Chapter 45-30. Yiqing Luo nestled in Diamo Xian's arms as she lazily tilted her head and looked at Yen Xiaoyi. At this moment, shouldn't you be expressing concern for me? Yen Xiaoyi took a look at Diamo Xian who was walking over slowly. There was not the slightest trace of emotion on the man's cold face. She shrunk her neck and replied softly, I can tell that you're fine just by looking at the overlord. What are you worried about? If Yiqing Luo's body had any discomfort, how could Diamo Xian be as calm as he was now? Diamo Xian carried Yiqing Luo onto a chair and sat beside her. Soon after, Gu Yun served up a filling meal. Diamo Xian stood by the side and brought it to her lips. Yiqing Luo opened her mouth and ate a mouthful. She squinted her eyes in happiness. Everyone, they really shouldn't have chosen to meet Yiqing Luo on the day she woke up. This day obviously belonged to the venerable sovereign alone. Yiqing Luo ate a few mouthfuls and her stomach was no longer empty. Her body had also warmed up and that was when she thought of them with great benevolence. All right. How have you been these few days? Did the people from the outside forces or the Palace of Darkness do anything? The few of them rolled their eyes. But he still answered Yiqing Luo's question. In the past few days there had been a lot of activity outside. However, this commotion was not because they had attacked the Gu residence. It was because of the Wind Cloud list. The Wind Cloud list had been held. Most of the factions that were watching the Gu residence shifted their attention to the honor roll. Only a small portion of people remained to guard the Gu residence. And this movement, it was because of the Palace of Darkness. The Wind Fame list this time round could be said to be extremely dangerous. Most people were seriously trying to use the Excellence list to climb to the top. A small number of people had already joined the Ren family's camp. In the second round of the Wind Cloud list, just as the people of the major forces were exhausted from the duel, a figure suddenly appeared. The people of the Ren clan in the arena took advantage of the break to attack the forces around them. By the time the other forces reacted, at least 100 elite profound practitioners had died. Instantly it caused countless backlash. All the major forces joined forces to demand an explanation from the Ren family. The horses of the Ren family descended from the sky. They started killing right away. Then, the Wind Cloud list had become a slaughterhouse. Only those who submitted to the Ren family could survive. After such a big thing happened, everyone knew that there was a venerable emperor overseeing the Bone Mansion. Naturally, not many people continued to stare. After listening to their conversation, Yiqing Luo raised her brows in astonishment. Ren Jianying is so impatient? They're fighting in the second round. Maybe he's worried about you. Gu Zishi began to analyze the situation. Ren Jianying could have easily obtained the inheritance rights of the Ren family from second young master Ren's hands. Moreover, she could have done so in a dignified manner that no one could find any fault with her. However, because second young master Ren chose you as his backing and Ren Jianying was afraid of you, she didn't dare to make a move against him, so... That's true, after all she's a lady and if she wants to inherit the Ren family legitimately, even if it's coercion and bribery, there would still be people who are not convinced. Yiqing Luo lazily took another mouthful of the thing that Diamo Xian had sent to her lips. After swallowing he continued, then, according to the current situation Ren Jianying has already controlled most of the forces in the Heaven Realm? Yes. Tong Ziqing fished out a piece of map from her bosom and threw it to Yiqing Luo. This is the distribution of forces that the group leader had secretly observed the current situation in the heaven realm. You can take a look. Chapter 45-31. Yiqing Luo took the map. Spread out on the table in front of him. The map above was very detailed. Every single faction was clearly marked. He also marked the forces that had submitted to the Ren family. Yiqing Luo leaned into Dmo Xian's arms and looked through the entire map before putting it down. In that case, Ren Jianying has already cooperated with the royal family and both of them are preparing to split the Heaven Realm's territory equally? Tong Ziqing shook her head. I can't tell what Ren Jianying's real motive is based on the current information. Yiqing Luo pointed to a direction on the map. Ren Jianying's ambition is not just to divide the world equally. What she wants should be the control of the entire Heaven Realm. She is planning to wait for the Heaven Realm to completely stabilize, and then counterattack the imperial family? Hearing this, Gu Zixi expression was somewhat complicated. Yiqing Luo nodded her head. On one hand she's working with the royal family, on the other hand she's working with the Palace of Gloomy Darkness, so naturally she wouldn't easily give up half of the country to the royal family. She paused and said, the royal family has the same idea as Ren Jianying. On the surface they maintained a cooperative relationship. Behind the scenes they were contending against each other. He was waiting. Let's see who takes the wrong step first. Once he took the wrong path, it would be a complete loss. Gu Zixi pursed her lips and looked at Huang Fusheng worriedly. The Heaven Realm is now divided into two factions. What will happen to the four great families? The only way for the four heavenly families is to band together. Yiqing Luo took a look at Huang Fusheng and then looked at Xiao Jin. They will form a group and then split the world with the other two families. But looking at the relationship between the four great heavenly realms, I'm afraid it will be hard to form a group. After all, the four heavenly families had always been in a state of smiling on the surface but cursing in their hearts. Let them stick together. Therefore they needed a leader. All the aristocratic families felt that the leader should be one of them. Therefore it was impossible for them to live in peace. After Yiqing Luo finished her words, she looked at Xiao Jin and Huang Fusheng's slightly changed expressions and her lips curled as she continued. But, based on Huangfu family's current situation, there's a high possibility that they will choose to rely on the Ren family or the royal family. She paused. As for old man Huangfu, if he's willing he can first hide in the Gu residence. On the surface Huang Fusheng and Xiao Jin didn't seem to care about the Huangfu clan. However, deep in their hearts they didn't want the Huangfu clan to be destroyed just like that. What they hated the most was the current clan head of the Huangfu clan and his people. Not the Huangfu clan. Yiqing Luo folded the map once again and immediately stood up. She walked towards Tong Ziqing and returned the map to her. No matter what happens to the Huangfu family in the future, as long as your Huangfu bloodline still exists, it's not impossible to rebuild the Huangfu family. Huang Fusheng and Xiao Jin's pupils instantly constricted. Their faces were filled with complicated emotions. After the Ren family stabilizes the current situation, the next one will be our Gu mansion. So, let's make the best use of our time and rest well. Yiqing Luo returned to Dmo Xian's side and stretched out her hand. I suddenly recalled that there's an extremely important matter waiting for me to settle. Dmo Xian held her hand and stood up. His hands naturally circled around her slender waist. They were still a little confused. Yiqing Luo had already pulled Dmo Xian out of the main hall. Looking at Yiqing Luo's figure completely disappearing before their eyes, Gu Zixi sighed as she half-squatted in front of Huang Fusheng and held his hands. What Luo said is right. As long as you and Xiao Jin are around, rebuilding the Huangfu family is not a problem. Update complete. What? End of this chapter. That you're tuning in to the Sword Dance in the Vast Sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.